Well, in the service that I attended earlier on today, I reflected on how few D-Day veterans there still are, and why it's really important now that in marking this really important part of our calendar, we renew our effort to tell the story about the service and the sacrifice that that generation made, not just in storming the beaches and parachuting behind enemy lines, but in the whole Second World War effort of people. Because young people these days regard this as something quite far in the past. And indeed, 80 years ago is a long time ago. But that critical moment when Western nations, Allied nations, took on Nazi Germany, invaded and stormed those beaches in Normandy is such an important part of our national story, an important part for the echoes of history that we're facing today with threats to not only our allies, such as Ukraine, but also to the UK as well.
You're talking there about the sacrifice that people made, and also that for many young people it feels like an awful long time ago. Do you agree with the analysis that some have made of the situation, that we're in a more dangerous time now than at any time, perhaps since that war, and that we've actually entered, I guess, a pre-war period, as the Defence Secretary has said?
I do. Our allies and ourselves are facing more difficult and contested times. It's not only the threat, the immediate threat that Russia is posing to our friends in Ukraine, but also the threats they're making to NATO nations in Eastern Europe, but also to the threats to the UK homeland as well. And in these more difficult times, it's important that we have a clear plan for defence. That's why Labour is proposing that we increase defence spending to 2.5%, that we invest more in British companies rather than sending contracts for military equipment to foreign countries, and that we're making sure we're renewing the contract between those who serve our country and the nation. Because with falling morale in each of our armed services and a frankly awful state of military accommodation with leaky roofs, broken boilers and black mould in bedrooms, we can see why the retention challenge in our armed forces is so difficult. But we need more people in our armed forces to see a career in military service, not only to protect ourselves, but to protect our allies. That's why Labour set out our ambition that on day one of a Labour government, we'll have a defence and security review that will look at the threats that we're facing, but also what's needed to deter those threats and, if necessary, defeat them.
OK, so one of the things that I know that the Labour Party has been quite critical on is what's happened to the army and the size of the army specifically under the Conservatives. Keir Starmer saying the Conservatives have cut the army to the smallest size since Napoleon. John Healey saying that they've hollowed out the army. So would a Labour government make the army bigger?
Well, it's not just Labour that's saying that the armed forces have been hollowed out. Ben Wallace said in the House of Commons that they've hollowed out.
So would Labour make it bigger then? Would Labour make the army bigger is the question?
Well, that's why we're having a defence review on day one of a Labour government, because there's certain information that you need to have to be able to make that decision. And in opposition, we don't get to see the classified briefings, the intelligence briefings, and the analysis from our allies that would be required to look at what is the shape of our armed forces. That's why we want that review on day one of a Labour government, reporting in the first year.
But you've said it's been hollowed out, haven't you? You've said it's been hollowed out, so you are making a judgment on it. I guess my other question is, you say you want to have a strategic defence review on day one. If that recommends increasing the size of the army, will you do it?
I mean, that's the reason why we're having this review. What we'll also set out in that review is a clear glide path as to how we get to 2.5%, and importantly, the sequence of what we spend that money on. Because we need to make sure that we're stemming the huge outflow of armed forces personnel who are leaving service at the moment, make sure we're investing in the right kit, especially purchasing that sometimes that complex high-end kit that we need with our allies, making sure that we're continuing the nuclear submarine presence in the North Atlantic that keeps us safe with a continuous at-sea deterrent. These are all difficult, expensive, but absolutely vital things that we need to do. That's why a proper defence review that looks at the sequence of that spend, the seriousness of the challenges we're facing, and how we need to shape our forces to make sure that they're able to respond to the challenges we're facing is so important. If I could fit it in a soundbite, I would. But the thing is, we need to have that serious review to make sure we're keeping our country safe.
I understand it's a complex issue and hard to fit into sound bites, but just forgive me because I'm not really clear. If the Strategic Defence Review recommends increasing the size of the army, will you then increase the size of the army?
I mean, we're having a defence review to right size our military, and that's not just the army, that's also the navy and the air force as well. I mean, each of the navy and air force have roughly around 28,000 people at the moment.
I'm still not
the
really
army's
clear, I'll be honest.
below 73,000 for the first time. We need to make sure we not only have the right number of people, but the right kit and the right formation, the right posture to make sure we can deter and defeat any adversaries. And that's what that defence review is designed to achieve.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Luke Pollard, there, the Shadow Veterans Minister, thank you.